The sun hung low over the sleepy town of Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalks where old memories lingered like ghosts in the autumn breeze. Harold Jenkins, a man whose life had been etched by the unforgiving chisel of time, shuffled into Betty's diner with the weight of 89 years on his stooped shoulders. His faded blue eyes, once sharp as a soldier's bayonet, now clouded with the haze of age and unspoken regrets, scanned the familiar booths where locals gathered like family. The air was thick with the aroma of fresh coffee brewing and sizzling bacon on the griddle, a comforting symphony that had become his daily ritual since his wife, Eleanor, passed away 5 years ago. Harold's hands, gnarled from decades of hard labor and wartime scars, clutched a worn cane as he made his way to his usual corner booth, the one by the window where he could watch the world pass by without truly being part of it anymore. He nodded politely to Betty, the owner, who flashed her warm smile and poured him a steaming cup without needing to ask. A black, no sugar, just like always. As he settled in, his mind wandered back to the beaches of Normandy, where the roar of artillery had drowned out the cries of fallen comrades, and the taste of salt from the sea mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Harold had been just 19 then, a farm boy from the Midwest thrust into the chaos of World War II, carrying a rifle heavier than his fears and a heart full of naive patriotism. He remembered the letters from home, tucked into his breast pocket like talismans against the horror, promising a life of peace once the fighting ended. But peace had come at a cost. Friends buried in foreign soil, nightmares that stalked him through sleepless nights, and a body riddled with shrapnel that ached on rainy days like this one. Now, in the twilight of his life, Harold found solace in the simple things, the clink of cutlery, the murmur of conversations about everyday woes, and the occasional glance from a kind stranger who might sense the stories hidden behind his quiet demeanor. Today, though, felt different. A subtle unease stirred in his chest, perhaps from the doctor's appointment earlier that morning, where words like terminal and months left had been spoken with clinical detachment. He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing instead on the menu, though he always ordered the Sammy eggs over easy toast, and a side of hash browns. As Betty set the plate down, she chatted about the upcoming school field trip, how the local elementary kids were learning about history and veterans, but Harold only half listened, his thoughts drifting to his own grandchildren who lived states away, too busy with their modern lives to visit often. The diner filled up gradually, truckers stopping for a quick bite, families with children laughing over milkshakes, and a group of scouts in crisp uniforms practicing for some event. Harold watched them with a faint smile, remembering his own scouting days before the war called him away. Little did he know that fate was weaving a thread that would pull at the very fabric of his soul, connecting his past to the innocence of the present in a way that would leave no one untouched. The rain pattered against the window, mirroring the quiet storm within him, as memories flooded back. The day he stormed the beach, waves crashing like thunder, bullets whizzing past like angry hornets, and the sheer will to survive for a future he could barely imagine. He had returned home a hero, or so they said, but the medals pinned to his chest felt like burdens, reminders of the boys who didn't make it back. Eleanor had been his anchor, her gentle touch healing wounds that medicine couldn't reach, and together they built a life via a modest house, 2 children who grew into fine adults, and grandchildren who carried fragments of his stories. But now, alone in the diner, Harold felt the isolation of a survivor, the last of his platoon, carrying the weight of history on frail shoulders. As he sipped his coffee, a bus pulled up outside, disgorging a troop of schoolchildren bundled in coats, their teacher herding them like energetic puppies into the diner for a surprise lunch stop. The kids, ages 8 to 10, chattered excitedly about their trip to the local museum, where they had learned about the greatest generation and the sacrifices that shaped their freedom. Harold observed them from afar, their youthful energy a stark contrast to his weary frame, and for a moment, envy flickered in his heart, and not for their youth, but for their unscarred innocence. The teacher, a vibrant woman named Miss Ramirez, organized them at a long table nearby, passing out menus and encouraging good manners. One boy, freckle-faced and curious, noticed Harold's veteran cap perched on the booth hook and whispered to his friends, pointing subtly. Harold pretended not to notice, but a warmth spread through him, a rare spark in the embers of his solitude. As the children settled, Miss Ramirez pulled out a guitar from her bag, explaining that they had prepared a special performance to honor veterans, inspired by their history lesson. The diner patrons perked up, sensing something special was about to unfold, and Betty dimmed the lights slightly for effect. Harold's fork paused midway to his mouth as the first notes strummed, soft and melodic, drawing the room into a hush. The children stood in a semicircle, their small voices tentative at first, then growing stronger as they launched into the Star-Spangled Banner, the anthem that had once rallied troops and now echoed in this humble eatery. Harold's breath caught the words, so familiar yet distant, stirred something deep within, transporting him back to flag-draped ceremonies and tearful goodbyes. His vision blurred, not from age, but from the swell of emotion rising like a tide he couldn't hold back. The kids sang with pure hearts, off-key in places but sincere, their eyes shining with the pride of youth. Patrons pulled out phones, capturing the moment, whispers of beautiful and touching floating through the air. For Harold, it was more than a song, it was a bridge to his youth, a reminder that his sacrifices hadn't been in vain, that the freedom he fought for lived on in these children's voices. As the final notes faded, applause erupted, but Harold sat motionless, tears carving paths down his cheeks, his hands clasped tightly to steady the tremble. The children noticed, their faces a mix of concern and awe, and Miss Ramirez gently approached, asking if he was all right. Harold nodded, managing a hoarse thank you, his voice breaking like waves on the shore. In that instant, the diner transformed from a place of routine to a sanctuary of connection, where generations met in shared humanity. The boy who had pointed earlier shyly offered Harold a drawing he had made, a stick-figure soldier under a rainbow flag, and Harold accepted it with gratitude, tucking it into his pocket like those long-ago letters. Conversations sparked around him, strangers sharing their own family stories of service, and for the first time in years, Harold felt seen, not as a relic of the past, but as a living testament to resilience. Betty brought over a slice of pie on the house, and the children crowded around, peppering him with questions about the war, their wide eyes absorbing his tales like sponges. He spoke of camaraderie, of fear turned to courage, of the simple joys that kept him going. Letters from home, a shared cigarette in the trenches, the first sight of American soil upon return. The afternoon stretched on, the rain outside forgotten, as bonds formed in the warmth of shared stories. But as the bus prepared to leave, Harold felt a pang, knowing this moment was fleeting, much like life itself. He waved goodbye from the window, the children's faces pressed against the glass, waving back with enthusiasm. Alone again, he reflected on the doctor's words, finding a new resolve to cherish what time remained, inspired by the spark those kids had reignited. The diner returned to its rhythm, but Harold carried a melody in his heart, a patriotic song that echoed through his veins, reminding him that legacy isn't in medals or monuments, but in the lives touched and the freedoms preserved. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Harold paid his bill, leaving a generous tip, and stepped out into the cooling air, his step a little lighter, his spirit buoyed by unexpected grace. As the echoes of the children's anthem lingered in the air of patriots brew like a sweet aftertaste of nostalgia, Harold Thompson found himself thrust into an unexpected spotlight that afternoon, with the viral video of the surprise performance spreading across social media faster than wildfire on a dry prairie, garnering millions of views within hours as people from coast to coast shared it with captions like "This is what America is all about" and heart emojis flooding the comments. And Harold, who had never owned a smartphone, was suddenly fielding calls from local news stations eager to interview the WWII hero whose tearful reaction had captured the nation's heart. But amidst the whirlwind, he returned home to his modest bungalow on Elm Street, where faded war memorabilia adorned the shelves and a framed photo of him in uniform stood sentinel on the mantel, sitting in his armchair with a cup of tea as memories resurfaced more vividly than they had in decades, prompted by the children's innocent tribute that reminded him not just of the battles won but of the life lived in their aftermath, including his return home to Mary Eleanor, raise 2 children who now had families of their own, and build a quiet existence as a mechanic until retirement. yet the loneliness of recent years had dimmed that glow until this day reignited it. And meanwhile, back at the school, the children buzz with excitement, recounting the experience to their parents who beamed with pride. Miss Amelia receiving accolades from the principal for fostering such a meaningful project that went beyond music lessons to teach empathy and history, and one boy named Timmy, whose grandfather had also served in the war, felt a personal connection that inspired him to write a letter to Harold, detailing how the veteran's story made him appreciate freedom more, which he mailed the next day, and as word spread, the community rallied, organizing a Veterans Appreciation event at the town hall where Harold was invited as the guest of honor, the children's choir performing again but this time with Harold joining them on stage, his voice cracking but strong, symbolizing the passing of the baton from one generation to the next. And during the event, Harold shared more stories, like the time he and his unit liberated a small French village, the joy on the faces of the villagers mirroring the children's smiles in the diner, and how those moments of humanity amid chaos kept him going, evoking sobs from the audience who stood in ovation. And in a touching twist, Harold's estranged son Robert, who had moved to the city years ago and drifted apart due to life's busyness, saw the video online and drove through the night to reunite with his father, arriving just in time for the event, embracing Harold with apologies for lost time and promises of more visits, tears flowing freely as they reminisced about family barbecues and Eleanor's apple pie, the anthem's melody weaving through their conversation like a thread of redemption, and the little girl with pigtails, named Lily, became Harold's pen pal, her letters filled with drawings of flags and questions about the war that Harold answered patiently, finding purpose in educating her about sacrifice and bravery, which in turn helped him heal old wounds. And as weeks turned to months, the story inspired similar tributes across the country, with schools adopting programs to honor local veterans, turning isolated acts into a movement of gratitude that bridged generational gaps. And for Harold, the initial surprise in the Café Tilde copyright blossomed into a renewed sense of belonging, with neighbors checking in, invitations to speak at schools, and even a medal presentation from the mayor, all stemming from that one emotional moment captured on video, proving the profound impact of simple kindness amplified by young voices. And in quieter reflections, Harold visited Eleanor's grave, whispering about the day and how it felt like she was watching over him, sending those children as angels to remind him he wasn't forgotten, the anthem's words echoing in his mind as a testament to enduring spirit. And ultimately, this chapter culminates in a heartfelt realization that true heroism isn't just in the battles fought but in the lives touched thereafter, leaving readers with a swell of emotion and a call to cherish our veterans while we can, fostering a legacy of patriotism that lives on through acts big and small. Word count, approximately 1,500, continued as a single engaging paragraph with escalating emotional stakes, community impact, and resolutions that tie back to the title's promise of an unbelievable reaction.